typical for the market. They're all over the place.
Right, so as you stated before, these are guidelines.
They are
and
guidelines.
You actually have someone here on the panel here that sees it a little bit differently,
Okay.
so I have to give Ed his.
Okay. Like seller concession is, I evaluate like any other adjustments you're going to make on your comparables to the property is how much the market reacted to the difference in the pricing of the concession. And I look at all the factors. I look at the list price of the property, what it's under contract for, did the concession impact the final sale price? And if it does, by how much? It's the market's reaction to how much that seller concession actually impacted the final sale price. So if I look at, and I also, when I'm running the data, I look at what the medium sale price, final sale price to list price ratios are. So if houses are selling for 4% less than their list price, and this property is under contract for 4 or 5% less than list price, and it has a 5 or 6% seller's concession, I find it not uncommon to the area. Other comps have 3 to 6% seller's concession. And I find it typical, and it's not having a significant impact on the final sale price. And that's what the definition I read it as. It says it does have a significant impact on the final sale price. And I don't find 3 to 6% being a significant impact. So I just put the adjustment on there, and I'll explain in my comments that it did not have a significant impact on the market's reaction in the final sale price, and I don't adjust at all for seller's concession. It's completely opposite.
Right, so it's a complete opposite.
But it's just like anything else you evaluate.
Unfortunately, if you have a problem with the seller says, Ed cannot do this your appraisal. But,
if you have it, I just felt that the definition I read says it was a significant impact. I don't see 3 to 6% being a significant impact.
It proves the point. These are guidelines, and they all live by these guidelines, and everybody's going to interpret these guidelines a little bit differently. So that's why we had the 4 years to help explain how they interpret the guidelines and how, based upon they being the 4 main appraisers for Center City for Trident, how we're interpreting the same guidelines.
And we're basing it on the appraised value.
Right.
Now, that house sold, and it had to be appraised at that sale price, so it had to be valued at that amount. So the discount automatically because
Right.
That's not true. A property may not have appraised it, and the
Well,
buyer came and got the money.
Yeah, well, I don't want to get into this. I just wanted to show you there's
Chances are.
there's two different ways of everyone looking at a guideline. Because somebody from Texas, if they were doing a field review, are going to deem it maybe differently than that. I mean, we've seen everything possible.
Now, if you have if the house is listed though, and it's selling for $10,000 more than final list price, and you have a $10,000 sales concession, then it obviously looks like it was inflated. So you call the realtor, you ask questions, you ask, what was the motivation behind it, the sale price being higher than the list price, and the realtor might say because the guy wanted that much for it, so we increased the price because they needed seller's concession to make the deal work for closing costs, and that's why they did it. So then you understand that they inflated the price, and that really wouldn't have been a typical final sale price. So you take it out. But if it's common to the area as far as seller's concessions are taken, and most of the transactions, it's typical needed for closing costs, then there's no justification I find to really reducing the sale price more than warranted.
So just to piggyback on that real quick, this is very, very important, and I think Kevin, Babs, and Chris, Larry, I think everybody agree, Sean and Mike in the back. There are numerous times the buyer calls me, they've just gotten under contract, they're very excited. What did you pay for it? Oh, I paid $180. Okay, great. It's great. We run our numbers at $180. We set our loan amounts. The agreement comes back, and the agreement is $190 with a $10,000 seller credit. And I've had situations that cause mass panic when the buyer finds out that they did not pay $180. They paid $190. That's what the appraisal has to be set at. That's what the loan-to-value ratios are set at. That's what your closing costs are set at. That's what your transfer tax is set at. So just be really careful when you're explaining that. I've had numerous times, well, no, I really paid this. Well, no, you didn't. You paid that price on that agreement. I've gotten into such situations where I have had to send that buyer the agreement of sale and read it with them. The sale price is that figure. So I know it's really dense, but you just have to be really diligent in making sure they understand they are truly paying that gross price, not the net. The seller cares about the net. The buyer really, in terms of negotiations, should, but in terms of facilitating the transaction, it is the total price. that is everything that we care about. We don't care about the net amount. We care about the gross. That's just really important. That happens a lot.
And then you have situations where throughout the negotiation of the contract, you have home inspections done, you find out what repairs.
Right.
So then you're gonna have to.
Let me piggyback on that one. So let's say you do have an agreement and you do have a seller assist, and then you're negotiating the home inspection, and then all of a sudden you negotiate another seller assist because of the home inspection. You need to let us know that because it might exceed guidelines or closing costs, and all of a sudden then we have another issue. So that's just a side try-to mortgage thing. So as you're negotiating seller assist, we need to know if there's an existing seller assist because it could impact the loan. Joanne had a question.
Well, Jason, are we dealing in a sense with semantics while at the same time they are paying the transfer tax on that gross amount, etc., and that's what appears on the agreement, but in explaining it to them, if they're paying, and if I'm wrong, tell me, if they're paying $190 but they're getting $10,000 back, I don't know that you need to keep using the words, that's what they paid for the house. So is that
but
wrong?
on the mortgage side, the loan
From the mortgage
and
side,
everything.
but they're still getting
But
the
they're in
$10
shock. Like
Right.
we've had it where they're in shock saying.
Well, it has to be explained
Right,
Right, and that's the
Right.
key.
It
Yes.
has to be explained
Yes.
right, but,
Yes.
you know.
I mean, unfortunately, I don't want to point out, but on Naval Square, those agreements of sale are so convoluted
They are.
that you add back and deduct and add back that we don't know actually what
Well,
sales
actually,
price.
what's going on that HUD for the final sale price is after after the builder or the developer has taken away. Like if there's a $35,000 premium for being on the 4th floor, and if they decided to, credit that back and throw in the options and all this, it's all listed on the agreement and it's showing the big number, but on the HUD one, on the first line, it's showing the reduced amount.
Right, but I
then
can
it
tell you how many
sells
people are
as close as
confused by that. And then the same thing, just on a regular normal agreement to sell, they're confused. Iva.
Well, I just wanted to say that if I know that a concession is being used for repairs, it clearly states that in the listing, or the closed listing, then I don't deduct it dollar for dollar. To me, that means that the house is an improvement. It's not, but it has to be clear that that money is for repair, like after your home inspection.
Right, but as a mortgage company, we really want to see it towards closing costs. So we're not going to the repair, we don't want to go to the repair side. Arlene?
What, if any, is the impact of a multi-unit building next to a high-end property?
How many units?
Your 5 units, 6 units?
5, 7.
Small.
In the city. In the city, it doesn't impact us greatly because it's pretty common in the market that you're going to have you're going to have a pretty good mix of properties on any streets in downtown Philadelphia. And I think where it would become a problem is if you had a flop house next to a house. That would be, I think, more of a problem. But usually. And a lot of it have been converted to condos that are like the 4-unit buildings. Because I know you and I have walked up many of them. And so, yeah, it doesn't have, I don't think in the city it has as big of an effect. Where it does impact is parking, obviously, in the city, but everything impacts parking.
Let's piggyback on that for a second, too, because one of the questions was, tell us about the process with multi-units. The rent evaluation, rent schedule, how do you come up with what you use for a rental schedule as, what does that add to the value of the property?
Well, what I do is, Trend has a lot of the rentals, but most of us know, like, your company doesn't really do management, but there are a lot of companies that are strictly management companies within the city, and you have to try to have a relationship with them. Some of them are very forthcoming. Some of them are not. I know Allen Doms for condos will give you condo rental information. As far as multifamily rental information, a lot of it is in there, and we have to evaluate that. The lenders really want to know what the market value of the property is. As appraisers, we look at what the income and how it impacts that value. when you get to like 6, 7, 8 and higher amounts, and which is out of our realm because none of us are general appraisers, then the income approach is considered you can value a building just on the income approach. For what we're doing for mortgages, when we do a mortgage, it's for the market value, and that's what the lenders want to see. And it's very fine. I mean, we do look at the income approach. We factor in and we determine whether the rentals of a property are at market. Now, a lot of times, you go into a property, it's been owner occupied on 1 or 2 floors, and it had for a 4-unit building, and there's 2 tenants who have been there for 20 years. Nobody's raised the market rent. Well, you look and you see that market rent for a 1,200 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath unit within the same market is 3 times as much. As appraisers, we have to forecast and say that this would be the estimated rental if this property was under normal market conditions rented. Now, obviously, that has some bearing to an investor. It also changes within the investor. A duplex, which is 2 units, normally you have a different buyer because a lot of times, as we know, there's a lot of duplexes in the city where basically they're a house and there's an apartment up on the 4th floor or in the basement. And there's a lot of ways to deal with that. So a different kind of buyer is going to buy that kind of property and it's going to buy a 4-unit building, which is basically more of an income producing. You can earn, as an owner, are able to take money out of the property at a certain point. So yes, it is a different type of buyer. So you try to compare as appraisers, 2s to 2s, 3s and 4s the same. You get a little bit of a difference between 3-unit and 4-unit buildings because between 2 and 3-unit buildings because of the type of person who's typically buying those. We do look at the income approach, but we base it on what the market will bring. There's not as many. I'm shocked. All my years in the business, I always notice when the market for residential single families is a little weaker, there's all of a sudden a lot stronger multifamily market. We have not seen that in the last few years. I haven't seen an increase. In fact, anytime I get a multifamily, it's a pretty good challenge to find comparables. And
Jay, on the mortgage side, we're seeing a little bit more of that.
Okay.
More of the multi-unit.
Good.
But, I don't want to cut you off on the multi-unit because you probably spend more time on that.
Yeah.
I think Mike has a question, so we can.
Hello. Just the value between below-grade kitchen, above-grade kitchen, or below-grade finished space versus above-grade finished space in spiral stairs.
Spiral stairs. So
That'd be a Trinity.
that would be a Trinity design. So the Trinity design, typical buyers looking for a home to be a Trinity with a basement is the kitchen space. Kitchen in that case would be used as part of the living space. It would be counted. It would be included in the living space. Whereas in a typical property, it would not be. Trinities, again, are an unusual but unique type of property for this specific market, and they're widely accepted through the market. So there's no, typically I'm just going to try to find other Trinities, other properties that have kitchens in the basement. Well, as far as but the spiral staircase is, again, it's inherent in the design. I mean, you're going to have issues getting furniture up the steps. That's something that people who are looking for essential homes are aware of. And it's already reflected in the value and the price of those homes. Was there something? As far as kitchen, basement, what else?
Below grade stuff.
Finished space. Okay, so you understand the basement area, if it's not the kitchen, if it's not included in the living space, and that again goes towards the Fannie Mae guidelines, which state that any room below grade cannot be included in living space, except in the case of Trinity or some other unique designs. So a finished basement, in a market where there's a high demand for finished basements, we can make an adjustment based on the cost to finish that basement. Sometimes the basement is finished excessively for the market, and what it costs to finish that basement will not necessarily reflect in market value. So we're not going to make line adjustment that's going to be typical or equal to what it costs to finish that basement. But certainly it has value in certain neighborhoods. Certain neighborhoods it's not in demand. Where you find neighborhoods where you have a lot of families, a lot of kids. Obviously that's a very appealing feature to have, and we'll be adjusting for that. Good.
Do you investigate, like, is it a partial finished basement?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So, and I see this, I do a lot of review work, and I will see in the MLS, sometimes it'll say finished basement, sometimes it'll say partially finished basement. In truth, no basement is completely finished. I mean, there's an area that's used for utilities. There's always an area that's not finished. The key is functional utility. So you could have a basement, as long as the basement is finished, the functional utility, as far as I'm concerned, is equal. And I'm not making an adjustment for finished versus part finished, because again, I don't really know from the MLS if it's actually 100% finished, 75% finished, 50% finished. It goes towards functional utility. Okay?
Frank?
I guess, from a realtor point of view, what we're trying to figure out is whether it's parking or kitchen below grade is there, how do we translate into an adjustment, from one property to another, if you know what I'm trying to say.
I do know what you're trying to say.
It's like you take the methodology of trending 1 to 3 months, 4 to 6, 7 to 12, and then apply that, whatever trend you see happening. Do you do the same of property with parking or without? Or,
Well, that's something that, again, can be quantified. I think, the parking space in a neighborhood where there's demand for parking, you could say that, the demand equates to $15,000, $25,000. It depends, again, on the neighborhood. I do a fair number of these talks, and the question always is asked of me, can you provide me a list? What do you adjust for this and this and that? I can't. And the way that I typically answer it is, and you may or may not like the answer, I've been doing this a long time, 20 years. I know the markets in which I appraise it, and I have a feel. It's a feel for the market, for understanding what someone is willing to pay for a finished basement, for an additional bathroom, for a garage, for a fireplace, for central air, for insulated less windows. It's just a feel for the market.
And when you say market, you really are talking about supply and demand.
Well, within a specific neighborhood.
Okay.
It's called a general rule of thumb when you make an adjustment. A general rule of thumb is what generally happens in that marketplace. It's not an exact number, it's just a general rule. For this area, people are willing to pay this much more for a parking space. So it's a percentage, and you just need to be within a reasonable amount of that percentage. It's not going to look excessive.
A quick question. In appraising high-end condominiums, how heavily do you rely on cost per square foot, and how heavily do you rely on the square footage in the City Hall records? And how correct are they?
The City Hall records, zero. Be about close to where we're at. Just based on experience in measuring houses and seeing the actual assessor's indication, condos, anything, all of them. Basically, the rule of thumb with that is if I measure a house and it's 200 square feet smaller than the actual indication by the assessor, and I'm using comps on the same street, I'm going to look what the assessor has, and I'm going to also look, we do a drive by the property, and use our professional opinion. I'll more than likely bring the value, the square footage size down 200 square feet. I'll just be consistent and making my opinion more consistent with my findings. And what's good about doing work in the same area over and over and over again is we pretty much in our own database will have that information handy to us as far as what the actual square footages are for condo projects, townhouses in certain sections. You just pretty much know what they are. So we're able to rely on our own information a lot more than even beginning to think about depending on the tax assessor's information.
Eileen has a question.
Just getting back to pending sales and comps, we're not always privy to what the pending sales are in other offices. And so I'm wondering, are other offices cooperative with giving you their pending
Yes.
sales?
I'll give you, I was talking to somebody, was Kevin that was telling the story? So I called somebody up and I said, I have a property that I want to use as a comparable, it's under contract, could you tell me what the price is? And they said, well, I'm not really allowed to tell you, but it was a $200,000 list price. And they said, it's not quite the list price, it's somewhere between 198 and 200. So, but for the most part, they are cooperative. Very few times I'll come across an agent and say, I just can't tell you. And I try and explain, the importance, and they're not willing to do it, they're not willing to do it.
Then we just call the other agent.
Will you call the manager of that office?
I will.
Well, we can find out, you guys have access to all your...
Right, yeah, if we can, but otherwise, if people have told me that, and I tell them, call the manager of the office, because, they'll be able to help you out with that
If
situation.
it's that important where it's going to make or break an appraisal, where you need to have that information, you'll find out. We'll definitely get the information.
So, we've been doing this for 2 hours. Okay, so we probably can go on more, but I know you guys need to go out and sell properties. But I asked Babs, Jason, Chris, Sean, Mike, Kevin, and Kim.
Hey, Kim.
Here. These, besides these 4 guys up here and myself, we are your business partners on a daily basis. We want to support you, whatever we need to do to help you with the transaction, to give advice, if you're having an issue, even with another mortgage company and we're not getting the mortgage, we can try to advise you the best we can within our regulations and specifications. But, I just want you to see that these guys go to battle with you day in and day out. These guys go to battle with you day in and day out. Irene and Marie back there go to battle with you day in and day out. And if it wasn't for the support that you give us and the support that we give back, we wouldn't be here. So I just want to thank you again for coming here, and hopefully you got a lot out of this.